I stood at the kitchen sink, my daughter's words still ringing in my ears. Stay out of my life. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said it like she meant it. After I raised her on my own, after every scraped knee, every college bill, every night I made sure she got home safe, she cut me off like I was a burden. So I did what any mother would do when love turns into liability. I erased her. From the will, from the trust, from every legal line that used to carry her name. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The bell above the gallery door gave its familiar tink, a sound Cassidy hadn't heard in 6 months. Not since she'd stormed out with paint under her nails and her mother's voice still echoing in her head. The air inside was the same, soft scent of varnish, linen canvas, and lemon oil polish clinging to the oak floors. Familiar, almost comforting. But comfort had a price here. Elaine didn't look up. She stood behind the counter, labeling new pieces with practiced precision. Her spine, stiff with the quiet grace of a woman who'd long since learned to absorb disappointment without flinching. The late afternoon sun bled through the high windows, catching dust motes midair, painting Cassidy's return in gold and gilt. Cassidy didn't say hello. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she moved past a series of coastal watercolors. Nothing had changed, not the lighting, not the way the room seemed to breathe differently depending on whether Elaine was in it or not. Not the way Cassidy could still feel 17 here, powerless, angry, unseen. I stopped by Dad's, Cassidy said, her voice too sharp for the silence. He said you skipped your cardiology appointment again. Elaine paused, one hand still resting on a roll of artist labels. I didn't skip. I rescheduled, Cassidy scoffed. You rescheduled it for when? After the next heart attack? That finally got Elaine to look up. Her face was calm, unbothered, but Cassidy knew better. There was a reason Elaine never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence did the wounding. I'm not going to be guilted into being afraid of my own body, Cassidy. I'm fine. No, you're not, Cassidy snapped. You fainted in the kitchen and refused to call an ambulance. Jordan told me everything. You just laid there until you could stand again. That was weeks ago. You shouldn't have been alone, Elaine blinked slowly. Then, with surgical detachment, she slipped another label under a glass sculpture's base. You're here now. What would you like me to say? Cassidy felt the heat rise up her throat. This isn't about me. You think I came here for closure or forgiveness or whatever romantic version of motherhood you've created for yourself? I came because you're not taking care of yourself. You don't get to shut everyone out and pretend it's noble. Elaine opened the till with a soft cauching and dropped in a stack of 20s, closing the drawer without comment. Cassidy clenched her fists. You know what? Her voice trembled with a rage she didn't plan to show. Stay out of my life. The words hit harder than she expected. Elaine didn't flinch, didn't argue. She just turned to the next stack of invoices and kept on labeling. Cassidy turned, stormed toward the door. The hinges let out a loud metallic groan as she threw it open and slammed it shut behind her, the bang echoing down the street like a gunshot. Outside, the October air wrapped around her throat, dry, cold, punishing. Her boots hit the sidewalk hard, like she could stomp out the panic blooming in her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't call Jordan. She just kept walking. That night, a text came through at 10:43 p.m. Jordan. She didn't mean it like that. Cassidy didn't answer. An hour later, Margot called. Cassidy let it go to voicemail. But the transcription popped up anyway. Margot. She used to ask for help. Now she delivers ultimatums. The sentence sat on the screen, pulsing with a truth Cassidy didn't want to face. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a text. It was a calendar notification. Reminder, gallery lease review, 7 days left. Cassidy stared at it, breath caught halfway between defiance and dread. She hadn't just walked out of a fight. She'd walked out of ownership, and Elaine knew it. Elaine's kitchen was quieter than usual, not peaceful, sterile. Every sound felt exposed. The low hum of the refrigerator, the scrape of her pen, the faint tick of the vintage wall clock she'd inherited from her mother but never quite loved. It was almost midnight. The estate folder sat open across the counter, thick, clipped, and unnervingly neat. Pale yellow tabs marked every critical section. Will, living trust, medical proxy, power of attorney. Cassidy's name was printed on every page, for now. Elaine moved slowly, but not hesitantly. Her glasses slid lower on her nose as she reread the clause designating Cassidy as sole executor, a line she and the estate attorney had written together years ago, when Cassidy still asked questions instead of issuing orders, when she still came to the gallery just to sit with her, when being her daughter still felt like a role she wanted, not an obligation she resented. Elaine pressed her highlighter to the page and drew a firm line across the text, one stroke. Then another. Next, the trust. Cassidy's share was already structured to dissolve upon Elaine's passing, timed with the gallery's dissolution clause. A tidy close, no mess. Elaine stared at it a long moment before reaching for the pen again. She didn't remove Cassidy's name, not yet. Instead, she reached for a notepad and wrote a single word in small, deliberate cursive. Severance. The word sat there, naked, too honest for revision. Across the kitchen island, her tea had gone cold. She didn't drink it. The light above her flickered once, then steadied. Elaine didn't look up. There was a knock. 3 soft raps, like someone unsure if they should be standing on the other side of this particular door. Margot let herself in anyway, coat still clutched in her arms, face flushed from the fall wind. "I know it's late," she said, "but you don't get to process this alone." Elaine didn't answer at first. She just reached for the next folder in the stack. The advance directive. Margot's eyes scanned the table. Notes, tabs, inheritance tables, a copy of the gallery deed, all laid out like evidence in a case no one wanted to prosecute. "You're rewriting everything," Elaine nodded. "Finalizing." Margot stepped closer. "Is it cruel?" Elaine didn't look at her. She simply underlined a clause in blue. Her voice came quiet but crisp. "It's honest." There was no room for sentiment in her tone, but there was something else. Grief, maybe. Not for what was, but for what was no longer salvageable. Margot leaned on the counter, watching her. "You don't want her to come back?" "I want her to grow up," Elaine said, "without believing she's entitled to my wreckage." Silence fell between them. Elaine picked up her phone and opened her contacts. Scrolled until she reached the name, Lewis Carver, Estate Counsel. She tapped it. "Elaine," he answered on the first ring, voice thick with sleep. "We're finalizing everything," she said. There was a pause. "Everything?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "Okay. I'll have the new drafts ready by Thursday." Elaine hung up without goodbye. Outside, wind rustled through the dry oak leaves like whispers just out of earshot. In the silence that followed, Margot spoke again, quieter this time. "You know, once you sign those papers, there's no easy undo." Elaine didn't answer. Instead, she folded the will shut and placed her hand on top of it, like a closing benediction. Her eyes never left the word she'd written, severance. It stared back at her like a verdict already passed. Elaine stood at the sink, watching the morning light break against the frosted glass. The phone buzzed beside her coffee mug, screen flashing with a name she didn't expect. Cassidy. She didn't answer. The message preview hovered for a second. "I didn't mean it like that," before disappearing under her fingertip. Deleted. No archive. No screenshot. No moment of pause. She set the phone face down and walked away. Lewis Carver's office smelled like old paper and pine-scented carpet cleaner. He wore the same gray sport coat he'd had since her first will was drafted, back when David was still alive and Cassidy used to crawl under the mahogany conference table during meetings, drawing rainbows on the legal pads. Now the table felt bigger, colder. Elaine sat straight in her chair, documents already open before Lewis could offer water or pleasantries. "I want her name removed," she said, tapping the signature line with the back of her pen. Lewis hesitated. "You're sure?" Elaine didn't blink. "I'm past the part where I ask myself that." He nodded. Quietly flipping through the original trust documents, he made a note in the margin and uncapped his pen. The gallery, transferred into a community arts trust, non-profit, educational designation. She slid the prepared charter across the table. "Margot and I filed the 501c3 registration last month." Lewis raised his eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. He read the draft silently, flipping through it with the methodical focus of someone trained to find the fault lines in a page. When he looked up, there was something unreadable in his eyes. That's a clean break. That's the point. They moved to the healthcare documents next. Power of attorney, he asked. Elaine folded her hands on the table. Revoked. Assign it to a neutral fiduciary. No one with a key to my house. Lewis scribbled another note. You're aware this excludes Cassidy from all future medical decisions. Elaine looked out the window, watching a leaf spiral to the concrete. She already made hers. The rest moved quickly. Clean signatures, notarized seals. Revisions tracked, printed, initialed. By the time the final packet landed in the red envelope, Elaine exhaled like she'd set something heavy down. Lewis stood to walk her out, but Elaine stayed seated. One more thing, she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter, unsealed, handwritten on thick stationery. For Jordan, she said. Don't include it with the estate. Lewis tilted his head. What is it? Just heirlooms. Personal, sentimental. He nodded, taking it gently. You want him to know why? No, she said, standing. I want him to remember I didn't forget him. Outside, the wind had picked up, whipping through the parking lot with early winter urgency. Elaine's scarf twisted around her neck as she walked to her car. Margot waited in the passenger seat, arms crossed, legs tucked under her coat. She looked at the red envelope on Elaine's lap as she slid inside. It's done? Elaine nodded once. Every last part. Margot didn't ask what that meant. She knew. They sat in silence for a moment, engine off, windows fogging faintly from their breath. You don't regret it? Margot asked. Elaine turned to look at her, not with bitterness, not with satisfaction, but with something quieter, weightless. There's no revenge here, she said, just relief. Margot opened her mouth, maybe to push back, but then closed it. They both looked out the windshield. A young mother was walking across the lot, tugging a toddler's hand as the boy dragged a plastic pumpkin pail behind him, oblivious to time and consequence. Elaine watched them pass, eyes unreadable, and then, almost absent-mindedly, she whispered something so low Margot almost missed it. She thinks this was about control. Margot turned to her. Wasn't it? Elaine's expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the envelope a little tighter. No, she said. It was about escape. Elaine was kneading dough when she heard the knock. 3 knocks, a pause, then one more, just soft enough to carry uncertainty. She wiped her hands on the kitchen towel, heart already knowing before her feet reached the front door. When she opened it, Jordan stood there. No coat, just a hoodie zipped to her chin, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. I'm not here to fix anything, she said. I just didn't want to wait for permission. Elaine stepped aside without speaking. The house smelled of rosemary and flower, and the kind of quiet only grandparents know how to keep. No TV, no idle music, just the steady hum of a space built on rhythm and restraint. Elaine poured water into the kettle, clicked it on, and set 2 mugs on the counter. You like peppermint? Jordan nodded, rubbing her hands together. They didn't speak again until the tea was poured. Elaine slid 1 mug across the table, then sat down across from her. This is still your place, she said. Jordan wrapped her fingers around the warm mug, but didn't drink. I didn't come on Mom's behalf, she said. She doesn't even know I'm here. Elaine didn't flinch. She's hurting, Jordan continued. She lashes out. That's her version of panic. Doesn't mean she's right. Doesn't mean she's not scared. She used to answer my calls, Elaine said quietly, before it became performative to ignore me. Jordan looked down, lips pressed in a thin line. She didn't argue. Instead, she said, You mattered to her once. Elaine's gaze didn't waver. She mattered to me always. A beat of silence. She still does, Elaine added. That landed with the weight of unsaid things. Years of swallowed apologies and uneven love. Of Cassidy's thresholds and silences. Of Jordan, watching both women try to save themselves by pulling away. I'm not here to defend her, Jordan said, but you and I, we never needed sides. Elaine reached for the photo box on the sideboard. It was old, hand-painted, the corners worn soft from time. She set it down between them. On the lid, in small black script, a label read, Keep only what's true. Jordan blinked. Her throat tightened. Elaine opened the box. Inside, a stack of Polaroids from a summer in Maine. Cassidy in a paint-smudged tank top, holding a 3-year-old Jordan in her arms. A hospital band from the night Jordan was born. A pressed violet from a bouquet Cassidy had once left on the gallery stairs, with no note. And near the bottom, an envelope, sealed, her name written in her grandmother's handwriting. Jordan looked up. Elaine held her gaze. "I've made changes," she said. "You'll hear about them soon enough. But this..." She tapped the box. "This is untouched. Because it's yours, not part of anything legal. No signatures, no conditions." Jordan nodded slowly, but didn't reach for it yet. "I don't want to be another reason you two never speak again," she said. Elaine smiled, but it was the kind that hurt to look at. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you were never a reason. You were the grace between us." Jordan swallowed hard. They sat in silence for a long time. The wind pressed faintly against the windows, and the scent of warm dough filled the room. Finally, Jordan reached into the box. She picked up the photo of her mother, barefoot and laughing, standing beside a wet canvas. She looked young, brighter, undone in a beautiful way. "I didn't know she used to laugh like that," Jordan said softly. Elaine's eyes grew glassy. "She used to ask for help," she murmured. "Now she mistakes silence for power." Jordan turned the photo over. On the back, Cassidy had scribbled a note in blue pen. "We made something out of nothing today." She stared at it a long time. "I'm scared she's going to ruin it all," Jordan said finally. Elaine didn't answer. She just folded the tea towel in her lap with quiet precision. "She won't," she said. Jordan looked up. "How do you know?" Elaine didn't blink. "Because it's already gone." Jordan flinched, not visibly, but Elaine saw it. The way her fingers tensed, the subtle shift of her breath. "I want to come back here," Jordan whispered, "even if she doesn't." Elaine stood slowly and pressed a kiss to the top of her granddaughter's head. "Then do," she said. "We begin where we can." The snow hadn't started yet, but the air held that kind of stillness, an almost metallic quiet before the first flakes fall. Elaine parked outside Lewis Carver's office and watched her breath bloom against the windshield before fading into nothing. She sat for a long minute, hand resting on the red leather folder in her passenger seat. Inside it, every revision, every seal, every undoing, the final draft of a life once entangled with Cassidy's name. When she finally stepped out, the cold hit like glass. Lewis's office lights were already on. Through the window, she could see him moving papers around, his gestures neat, deliberate, rehearsed. He opened the door before she could knock. "Morning," he said softly, as if the word itself might break something fragile. "Let's finish," Elaine replied. The conference table was cleared this time. No clutter, no old files. Just 3 thick documents, a black fountain pen, and a pot of coffee that neither of them reached for. Lewis slid the first packet toward her. "Will, trust, property designation, all integrated revisions," he said. "Cassidy's name has been replaced or omitted in every clause." Elaine didn't hesitate. Her signature flowed across the line, steady as breath. The second document, the gallery transfer. He pointed to the page. "You're certain you want the Foundation's charter to name the nonprofit as primary beneficiary? It means full dissolution of private ownership." Elaine nodded. "It's not a gallery anymore. It's a classroom waiting for light." He didn't argue, just watched her sign again. With each page, the air seemed to grow denser. The pen left tiny grooves in the paper, and Elaine's pulse beat in rhythm with the sound of ink meeting surface. Final, deliberate, unhurried. Next, personal items and heirlooms. Lewis's tone softened. "These are reassigned to Jordan through the secondary letter." "Keep that separate," she said. "It's not to be read with the estate." He noted it. "And the financials?" he asked. Elaine leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. "Scholarships, women's residencies, summer programs for students who can't afford paint, let alone tuition." Lewis smiled faintly. "That's generous." "It's fair," she said. "The art saved me once. Maybe it can do it again, just not for me." He nodded. Last one, the power of attorney, a legal transfer of control from bloodline to neutral trust. Lewis read the line aloud, more ceremony than necessity. All rights of representation revoked and reassigned to the fiduciary board as proxy. Elaine didn't look up. Her pen hovered for a moment, 1 second, maybe 2, and then touched down. The ink bloomed black and irreversible. Lewis exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound of finality. "This is irrevocable," he said. Elaine's voice came low, steady, unflinching. So was her goodbye. He didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like apology. Elaine pushed the signed documents toward him, aligning the edges perfectly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the sheer weight of release. Lewis gathered the papers, placed them in the envelope, and pressed the flap shut with the firm pressure of a man who'd done this too many times, for too many families that couldn't stay whole. "Would you like copies delivered?" he asked. "No," Elaine said. "Let the ink dry first." Outside, the air had turned to sleet. A thin sheet of rain and frost glistened against the asphalt. Elaine pulled her scarf tighter, the fabric brushing her cheek, still faintly carrying the scent of Jordan's peppermint tea from the night before. She reached her car, placed the red folder on the passenger seat, and sat for a moment without turning the ignition. Across the street, the gallery's sign swung in the wind: Elaine Barlow, Studio and Gallery. Paint fading, corners chipped. She knew soon it would be replaced by the foundation's name, something that didn't belong to her, something that could outlive her without the burden of memory. She started the engine. Headlights carved through the mist. Before pulling away, she took one last look at the building. "Let it be free," she whispered. The words vanished into the cold, unheard by anyone but her. Then her phone buzzed once on the console. A new message. Cassidy. "We need to talk." Elaine stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. The rain thickened. Her wipers stayed still. Finally, she turned off the car and stepped out into the wet cold, leaving the phone glowing quietly in the dark. The email subject line read, "We need to talk." Elaine opened it 2 days after the message had landed, long after the sleet had hardened into ice and thawed again under a gray, uncaring sky. She sat at her kitchen table, hands clean, papers spread before her in calm symmetry, letters, estate filings, binder tabs aligned like vertebrae. The message wasn't long. Cassidy never wasted words when she wanted control. "You've overreacted. There's no reason to make permanent changes based on a temporary argument. We've had worse. Let's just meet and sort this like adults, privately, without lawyers, before this gets more complicated than it needs to be." Elaine stared at the blinking cursor in the reply field. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then curled back. No response, no need. She clicked Move to Folder and dragged the email into a document repository she'd created just that morning. Label: Attempted Coercion. Log 1. She closed the laptop. Lewis Carver's voicemail had already confirmed receipt of her request. By noon, she had the new document in her inbox, a single-page edition formatted with unblinking precision. No contest clause. Addendum A. Elaine printed it, signed it, scanned it back in, and watched the upload bar complete as slowly as a breath underwater. That one line of legal armor meant Cassidy couldn't challenge the estate without forfeiting everything. Not the house, not the gallery's new trust, not the letters, not the memories, not the shadow of ownership she'd once carried like a birthright. The clause did what no argument ever could. It erased entitlement. That night, the living room smelled faintly of citrus oil and old wood. Elaine had pulled out the legal pad, thick-lined, yellow, worn at the corners. Her handwriting, always clean and exacting, covered 3 pages before she folded them into a document sleeve and wrote on the front, "For the record." The letter was not addressed to Cassidy. It began with the date. It detailed Elaine's intentions, outlined the revision timeline, noted the paper trail, referenced the gallery trust, the charitable financial disbursements, the reallocation of assets, and the removal of Cassidy's legal standing. There was no emotion in the language, no poetry, just documentation, just clarity. Elaine signed the last page with the date, her name, and the phrase, "voluntarily and without duress." Then she added a line at the bottom, underlined twice. "This is not estrangement. This is release. Margot arrived just before dinner, the way she always did, mid-sentence, mid-thought, a half laugh on her lips that faded the moment she saw Elaine's expression. You got another message, didn't you? Elaine nodded once. An email. Margot dropped her coat on the chair and moved to the counter, pouring herself a glass of water. Let me guess. Guilt-laced compromise? Threat-laced niceties, Elaine said, thinly veiled. She still thinks she owns part of your life, Margot muttered. Elaine reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded recipe card. The handwriting was Cassidy's, ink faded with time. Not anymore, she said, placing the card back into its folder. That part's out of print. They stood in silence for a beat. Margot looked toward the window. A crow perched on the wire out front, black against the darkening sky. She'll escalate, Margot warned. You know that. Elaine didn't argue. She picked up the no contest addendum and slid it into the estate binder, spine creaking slightly under the weight of legal finality. She can scream into a vacuum if she wants, Elaine said. I just won't echo back. Later that night, Jordan called. Just a check-in. Elaine answered on the first ring. Is she coming for the gallery? Jordan asked. No, Elaine said. It's already gone. She won't let it go. She won't have a choice. There was a pause. Jordan's voice cracked slightly. Are you okay? Elaine looked at the photo box on the shelf, at the sealed letter, at the copy of the gallery deed, stamped and filed. I'm clean, she said, for the first time in years. But the next morning, when Elaine walked out to the mailbox, there was something new. A certified envelope, return address, Cassidy E. Barlow. Elaine held it like a lit match, not opening it, not yet. But she knew it wasn't an apology, not a plea, not peace. She stepped back into the house, heart calm, hands steady, and slid the envelope into a file cabinet, labeled countermoves. The front porch groaned under Jordan's weight as she shifted from one foot to the other, hands jammed into her jacket pockets. She didn't knock this time. Just waited, quiet, respectful, unsure. Elaine opened the door with her reading glasses still perched low on her nose. You're early, she said, not unkindly. Jordan gave a half smile. Didn't feel like waiting for permission again. Elaine stepped aside. They moved into the kitchen where something simmered faintly on the stove. Lemon and thyme, maybe. The late morning light filtered through the gauzy curtains and soft patches, turning the tile floor to watercolor. Jordan didn't sit right away. Her voice came carefully, too careful for someone her age. I can stop coming if that makes things easier. Elaine turned slowly. Jordan's face didn't show defiance. It showed protection. A quiet readiness to fold herself up and out of the picture if it meant sparing Elaine more fracture. I know it's complicated, Jordan said. I know I remind you of her. I don't want to hold a seat that costs you peace. Elaine crossed to the table and sat. She gestured to the opposite chair. You haven't asked me to disappear, Jordan. That's the difference. Jordan blinked. Elaine didn't elaborate. She just waited, as if the air itself would smooth the space between them. Finally, Jordan sat. Elaine poured them both tea. Quietly, gently. Ritual more than hospitality. You busy next weekend? She asked, tone light. Jordan looked up. Why? There's a sculpture walk at Edgewater. Local artists, temporary installations along the river. I haven't been in years. Jordan's brows lifted slightly. You want to go, Elaine shrugged. I'd like to try. No pressure. No expectations, Elaine echoed. Jordan grinned. I'll drive. That way, if you hate it, you can make me stop for pie on the way home and call it a win. Elaine raised her mug in salute. Deal. That afternoon, Elaine opened the cabinet in her study, bottom drawer, far left. Inside were folders labeled not with dates, but with words, origins, legacy, my version of events. She pulled out the binder marked narrative custodianship, a term Lewis had chuckled at, but hadn't objected to legally. She flipped to the page where a name had once been written in black ink, and now sat redacted in neat strike-through. Below it, she wrote in careful script, Jordan Lee Barrett, primary custodian. She added today's date, initialed it, and closed the binder with quiet resolve. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about truth. By dusk, the sun had dipped behind the bare trees, and Margot had arrived with her usual flair, elbows first, boots wet from rain, and a reusable grocery bag of casseroles she insisted on freezing, just in case someone forgets to eat. They worked in the garage side by side. Boxes lined the floor, each marked with bold black marker: Cassidy, stored paintings, Cassidy, studio supplies, Cassidy, misc. Personal. They didn't talk much at first, just lifted, taped, and labeled. The air was tinged with old paper and turpentine. Every once in a while, Margot would glance over, gauging Elaine's expression like someone handling glassware in a thunderstorm. "I can call the donation center for pickup," Margot said finally, tapping the lid of one of the boxes. Elaine nodded. "Put them under 'to be donated.' All of it." Margot paused, her hands resting on the last open box. "You sure?" Elaine pulled something from the corner of the box before answering. A photo, slightly curled at the edges, colors soft from time. The three of them, Cassidy, Jordan, and Elaine, on the edge of a trail somewhere in Vermont. Cassidy's hair was windblown, her cheeks flushed. Jordan was still in pigtails, standing between them with 2 fists full of fallen leaves. Elaine stared at it for a moment, then slid it into her sweater pocket. "Just not this one," she said. "The rest can go." Margot closed the box and taped it shut. They carried the stack to the edge of the driveway, just under the overhang. Rain started lightly, quiet taps on cardboard and shingles. Elaine lingered a beat longer than necessary. "Do you think she'll come?" Margot asked. Elaine didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the labeled boxes. History, condensed, and ready to be rehomed. "She'll try," she said eventually. "But not for what's here." Later, as Jordan pulled out of the driveway, headlights sweeping across the cedar fence, Elaine stood at the window with the photo still in her pocket. She didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just whispered something into the dark, not meant for anyone to hear. "I remember who we almost were." And behind her, tucked on the mantel between a ceramic vase and the edge of the fireplace stone, the letter to Jordan sat unopened. Still waiting, the wire transfer processed at 3:17 p.m. Elaine didn't watch the screen while it loaded. Just listened to the rhythmic tapping of the rain on her study windows and the low hum of the heater cycling on again. She sat in her worn leather chair, legs crossed at the ankle, and signed the final digital authorization with the same steadiness she used to hang oil canvases at the gallery. $80,000. From the trust that had once belonged to Cassidy's name, to the Russo Foundation for Emerging Women Artists. Restricted use, residency support, materials, solo exhibitions, women identifying applicants only. No family ties required. She clicked submit, didn't flinch, didn't justify. Just logged it under a folder labeled What Remains. Lewis had already anticipated the follow-up. The draft paperwork arrived by courier the next morning. No email, no digital copy. He knew Elaine appreciated things in paper form, where weight could be felt and signatures could bleed into the grain. Elaine opened the envelope on her back porch, coffee steaming in her lap blanket folded neatly over her legs. The document was 4 pages. At the bottom of page 1, it read in bold, "No contest, no reversal, no reinstatement clauses permitted." Elaine signed without commentary. As she did, a squirrel darted across the yard, scattering dead leaves in all directions. For a second, she thought of Jordan as a child. Barefoot in the fall, cheeks pink, scattering leaves like a game. Cassidy had watched from the porch steps that day, arms folded, smiling like someone who didn't realize the moment was worth remembering. Elaine closed the folder and set it on the small bistro table beside her. Then she picked up the phone. Nina Russo had the kind of voice that carried clarity like a bell. Even through the phone, her words had shape. "You're not giving a gift," she said. "You're correcting a pattern." Elaine didn't argue. She was sitting in the sunroom now, one leg tucked under her, watching the sky bruise into evening. The photo from Vermont sat across the room on a side table, quiet, present, unchanged. "I let one girl believe she had to carry my legacy like a burden," Elaine said. "I won't do that again. Not to anyone. Not even in name." Nina was silent for a beat. "The board is stunned. Grateful, but stunned." "Let it be something useful finally," Elaine said. Nina's tone softened. "Do you want your name listed? A wall engraving, maybe?" Elaine shook her head instinctively, though no one could see her. Don't use my name. Another pause. Then Nina said, We've had an idea. A plaque, small, installed at the main entrance of the new residency wing. No donors listed, just a phrase. Elaine didn't speak, letting the moment fill itself. Nina continued. It would read, Legacy without apology. Elaine closed her eyes, that phrase pressed against something inside her, a place too deep for anger, too long quieted by compromise. The words weren't soft, they weren't warm, but they were right. She nodded once. Yes. That weekend, she and Margot stood in the back room of the gallery, now stripped of its sales desk and gift wrap counter. The hardwood floors had been buffed, and the walls were bare again, clean slates waiting for someone else's expression. Margot held up a broom. You want me to ceremonially sweep out the last 20 years? Elaine smiled faintly. Let's start with the corners. They worked until the sun dipped low across the windows, casting gold rectangles on the floor. Dust rose in tiny glittering storms with every sweep. When they paused for water, Margot asked, You going to tell Jordan? Not yet, Elaine said. I don't want her to carry the weight, just the story. You're really doing it, Margot said, a little breathless. Giving it away. I already did. That night, Elaine went back into the study and pulled down a notebook she hadn't opened in a decade. Inside, lists of gallery acquisitions, curatorial notes, grant proposals, and scribbled margins filled with Cassidy's old ideas, color-coded schemes, names of artists she once believed in. She flipped to the back. There, in Cassidy's handwriting, If I can't make something beautiful, I'll make something true. Elaine traced the words, and then slowly, carefully, she tore the page from the notebook, folded it, slipped it into a new folder labeled Next Generation, Do Not File. She didn't know what she would do with it, only that she couldn't throw it away. At the Russo Foundation offices, the plaque was already in design. Slate background, white etching, minimalist font. Legacy without apology, it would be mounted in the entryway, quiet and firm, no backstory, no dedication, just presence. But inside Elaine's house, above the mantel where Cassidy's photo once hung, a blank canvas had taken its place, still unpainted. Waiting, Cassidy didn't bother with pleasantries. Louis Carver barely finished his greeting before her voice hit like glass on tile. You're her attorney, right? He sat at his desk, a fresh stack of closing files untouched before him, and leaned back in his chair, calm, measured, ready. I am, he said. You signed off on this, on all of it? She snapped. The gallery, the trust, the removal, the reallocation of my entire life? Louis didn't reach for the file. He didn't need to. He had memorized every page the moment Elaine signed them. Yes, he said simply. I did. I'm her daughter, Cassidy said. Voice clipped. Do you understand that? He nodded, though she couldn't see it. I do. It's noted throughout the original estate. And now? Now it's noted under Revision Log Mark C7, along with the signed statement of intent and a cognitive capacity report dated 2 weeks prior to execution. Silence, then a bitter laugh from her end of the line. She's mentally unwell. This is elder abuse. She's not in her right mind. Louis opened his drawer, pulled out a single sheet, Elaine's most recent neuropsych eval, signed by an independent clinician and witnessed by 2 professionals outside the estate's chain of interest. She was evaluated by Dr. Marla Brent, he said. Not retained by me, not affiliated with the foundation. Full cognitive panel, voluntary, passed without concern. He waited. Cassidy didn't speak, so he added, Would you like a copy emailed or faxed? The shift in tone was sudden, like the wind changing before a storm. I'm calling a lawyer, Cassidy said, low and dark. You people think this is finished? It isn't. Louis adjusted the angle of the lamp on his desk, casting a clean circle of light over his notes. We're ready for that, he said. She hung up. Back at the house, the sun was slipping behind the trees in long streaks of honey and ash. The glass of wine in Elaine's hand glinted as she stepped out onto the back porch. Barefoot, sweater sleeves pushed to her elbows. The air smelled of pine needles and wet bark. A late October breeze stirred the wind chimes gently, just enough to mark the quiet without breaking it. She didn't need to check her phone. Lewis would have already logged the call. She sipped the wine slowly, letting the silence settle around her like a second skin. There had been years when silence felt like punishment. Now it felt earned. Inside, the study lights were off. The plaque draft from the foundation sat folded on the edge of the piano, next to the blank canvas and the envelope she hadn't yet given Jordan. Elaine traced her thumb along the rim of the wine glass and exhaled. The birds had stopped singing for the night. The leaves rustled once, then stilled. This was what clarity felt like. Not a strike of lightning, just the absence of static. At Lewis Carver's office, he filed the phone transcript under Inquiry, Cassidy Barlow date, redacted, status, threat of litigation pending, client prepared. He highlighted a single line from the call. I'm calling a lawyer, and wrote beneath it in neat legal shorthand. Preceded by 0 formal contact attempts, motivated by discovery of personal exclusion. No evidence of coercion or diminished capacity. All documentation in place. He closed the file. The storm had arrived, but the house was ready. Cassidy stood in her apartment downtown, phone still in her hand, pacing in slow, angry circles. The lights were off. The bottle of wine she'd opened sat untouched. Her laptop glowed faintly from the dining table, her inbox open to a forwarded document she couldn't unsee. Estate revision filed and finalized. At the bottom of the first page, all former beneficiary claims nullified without contest. She slammed the lid shut. Outside, the traffic passed like it always did, unbothered, unaware. But Cassidy's hands were shaking now. She picked up the phone again. This time, she didn't call Lewis. She scrolled past Jordan's name, past Mom, past the number marked Gallery Landline Defunct, and stopped on a contact she hadn't dialed in over 5 years. Attorney Shannon Adler. She tapped, let it ring. But before it connected, she pulled the phone away, hit end, and threw it face down on the counter. The silence that followed was not peace. It was panic, dressed as stillness. Back at Elaine's, the sun was gone. The porch light cast a soft glow on the steps. Her wine was nearly finished. Inside, the oven beeped. Roasted vegetables for one. She didn't move to get them. She just watched the sky. Nothing urgent, nothing broken. Just the truth, of finally having the room to stand still. Cassidy's call came just after 9. Jordan saw the name flash across her screen as she dried her hands on a dish towel, heart sinking not from dread, but from recognition, the kind of anticipation you get when someone you love only calls to fix a mess they made. But never while it's still breaking. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, she said gently. Cassidy's voice was taut. I just got off with Lewis. She rewrote everything. Did you know? Jordan's jaw tightened. I knew changes were coming. I didn't know the details. She cut me out, Jordan. Fully, legally, financially. The gallery, the trust, even the house. Gone, like I was never her daughter. Jordan said nothing. Cassidy pressed harder. She's not well. You've seen it. You've heard her. This has to be reversible. She's been clearer than I've ever seen her, Jordan said, quietly. Cassidy went silent. The silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It was a tactical stall. Jordan had heard it before, so she didn't wait. You told her to stay out of your life, Jordan continued, voice steady. And now she has. Cassidy let out a sharp exhale, part laugh, part disbelief. Wow, okay. I'm not taking sides, Jordan said. I'm reminding you that the line you drew? She didn't cross it. She just stopped pretending it wasn't there. There was a click, then the dial tone. Cassidy had hung up. Jordan stared at the phone for a moment, then placed it gently on the counter. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't feel guilty. Instead, she opened a new message and typed, I'm still here, just so you know. She sent it to Elaine. No punctuation, no signature. 30 seconds later, her phone buzzed. A single reply. 1 period, nothing more, and yet it held everything. Margot arrived unannounced the next day, setting a brown paper bag on Elaine's kitchen counter without asking if it was needed. Soup, she said. For grounding. Elaine raised an eyebrow. I'm not the one spiraling. No, Margot agreed, kicking off her boots. but you're still the one weathering it. Elaine leaned against the counter. She called Jordan. I figured. She hung up. Margot made a face that sat somewhere between grimace and smirk. And Jordan? Elaine reached for her phone and showed her the message. Margot read it, then looked up. You replied with a dot? I replied with silence, Elaine corrected. I just gave it shape. Margot sat down, pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. You don't have to reattach just because she's panicking. I didn't, Elaine said. She opened the drawer near the fridge and pulled out a cloth napkin to place beneath the soup bowl. Her movements were slow, precise, not fussy, deliberate. I just paused the noise, she said. At Cassidy's apartment, the day passed in a blur of unopened tabs and unmade arguments. She hovered near her phone all morning, waiting for a notification that never came. Not from Jordan, not from Elaine. The silence was too pointed to ignore and too calm to fight. She scrolled her inbox. The foundation had sent a public release, a plaque photo attached, slate background, white letters, clean font, legacy without apology. Cassidy stared at it, mouth dry. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd once wanted her name on that wall. Now the words stared back at her like a warning. You don't own this anymore. She closed her laptop, stared out the window, waited for something to feel breakable again. That evening, Elaine sat alone on the back steps, sipping ginger tea instead of wine. She was wearing Jordan's old college hoodie, threadbare at the cuffs, soft in a way grief rarely allowed. The wind was cooler tonight, the trees skeletal now, but the quiet still held. Inside, the oven ticked softly as it cooled. She didn't turn on the TV, she didn't open a book, she didn't write. She just let the message Jordan sent exist beside her, still glowing on the screen. That one line, I'm still here, just so you know. Elaine read it again and smiled. Not wide, not triumphant, but enough. The gallery didn't hum the way it used to. It breathed now, less performance, more pulse. No spotlights, no curated hush, just open air and paint that still smelled wet. Elaine stood in the middle of the space, arms folded lightly across her chest, as Nina adjusted the final bracket on the new signage above the door. The metal lettering caught the late morning light like it was trying to earn its place. Russo Center for Art and Story, Residency, Plus. Exhibit Hall. No mention of Barlow, no plaque for Cassidy, no ghosts, just breath. Nina stepped down from the ladder and joined Elaine at her side. They both looked up at the clean, matte finish of the sign, simple, quiet, unapologetic. You okay? Nina asked. Elaine didn't answer right away. She walked slowly toward the far wall, where Cassidy's last piece once hung. An abstract swirl of grief and ash and distance. Always the most expensive piece on the invoice. Always the one Cassidy insisted be near the entrance. Gone now. Donated without fanfare to a community hospice in Denver. Elaine had requested anonymity. In its place now, 5 pieces from a local student named Lena, age 19, brushstrokes uneven, colors fearless. One of the canvases showed a cracked ceramic bowl filled with tiny golden coins. A note on the wall read, "This is about how it feels when you ask for help and someone says yes." Elaine stared at it for a long time. Nina didn't interrupt. By afternoon, Elaine was back in her study. The light soft and amber across the floor. She sat at her desk with a linen-bound brochure, mock-up beside her, and a fountain pen in hand. The heading at the top of the page read, Opening Exhibit, Foundation Launch Weekend. Below it, blank space reserved for the letter from the founder. Elaine pressed the pen to paper and wrote slowly. Every word measured, nothing overwritten, no apologies. We were told art was a legacy of names, but it was always a legacy of hands. This space does not remember the past. It makes room for what was missing in it. There are no second chances here, only first ones, finally offered. Thank you for building something with us. She signed it simply. Elaine, then set the pen down and leaned back. No fanfare, no flourish, just truth, offered plainly. Later that night, Margot sat across from her at the kitchen table, brochure in one hand, tea in the other. The world outside was dimming again, trees bowing under the early weight of November. You said more with restraint, Margot said, eyes still on the page, than she ever did with volume. Elaine smiled. Genuine. The first one in weeks. At the gallery, final touches were being installed. The last nail hung, the last easel positioned. Outside, small chalkboard signs were propped against the curb, arrowed toward the entrance with cheerful, messy handwriting. Opening weekend. Public welcome. No tickets needed. Across the street, a car idled for a long moment. Driver unseen, engine running. Then, quietly, it pulled away. Inside the glove box, a gallery brochure, creased but unread. Elaine saw her before anyone else did. It was the tilt of the head first, familiar, almost theatrical. Then the posture, arms crossed, chin slightly lifted. The smirk that didn't quite reach the eyes. Cassidy, standing just beyond the gallery entrance, a half step into the lobby, as if waiting to be noticed but unwilling to announce herself. Elaine didn't flinch. She stepped back from the student exhibit she'd been reviewing, nodded politely, as if Cassidy were just another patron, and kept walking. No pause, no tension, no invitation. Cassidy's eyes flicked toward her. She opened her mouth, but Elaine was already around the corner. Nina caught it from across the room and approached, brows raised. "Want me to step in?" she asked, voice low, measured. Elaine didn't even turn her head. "No need," she said. "Her access is cosmetic." Nina hesitated. "You're sure?" Elaine adjusted a crooked artist placard and smiled faintly. She has the right to walk the space, but it's no longer hers to narrate. Cassidy took her time, at least outwardly. She moved from piece to piece like someone trying to read subtitles in a film they didn't choose. Leaning in, tilting her head, pretending to study. Her heels echoed faintly on the hardwood floors, the sound unnervingly loud against the hum of low conversation and quiet admiration. She stopped in front of Lena's cracked bowl piece, the golden coins spilling like apology, and tilted her head. She didn't laugh, didn't sneer, but she didn't linger. When she reached the west wall, the one that used to hold her signature piece, her breath caught, but just barely. The space was filled now with soft, raw work from first-timers, color outside the lines, canvas edges uneven, no name tags worth Googling, nothing framed in grief, nothing curated to provoke. Cassidy scanned the brochure. Her fingers tightened as she flipped the pages. No mention of her, no quote, no footnote. She traced the edge of the brochure and then quietly folded it in half, tucked it into her coat pocket like someone leaving a hotel map they never needed. She walked back through the gallery in silence. No confrontation, no announcement, just footsteps. She passed Elaine by the front desk, didn't look at her, didn't say goodbye. Just pushed open the gallery door and stepped into the late afternoon cold. The door's chime rang out, tinny and harmless. Then she was gone. Later that night, Elaine sat at her desk, cup of peppermint tea cooling beside her. She opened the estate binder, not the legal one, but the personal one. A thick black journal with no tabs, no codes, just entries written in her own hand under a single title, Emotional Log, Events Worth Recording. She flipped to the most recent page and wrote, Cassidy entered gallery, observed exhibits, spoke to no one, left without incident. Closure, observed. Not discussed. She set the pen down, closed the book. And for the first time in months, didn't file it away. She left it open, on the desk, under the lamp, still breathing. The letters started coming in a week after the exhibit opened. Folded notebooks, cheap printer paper, hand-scrawled messages in black ink. Some typed, some barely legible, all unedited, none of them asking for anything, just thank you. Elaine didn't expect them. Nina hadn't mentioned it, but one morning a manila envelope sat on the gallery office desk with a yellow sticky note attached. Elaine, these are yours. Thought you might like to see. N. Inside were 12 letters from student artists, first cohort of the Russo Center's residency. One started with, "No one's ever let me paint without fixing me first." Another, "I thought I needed approval. Turns out I just needed time and paint." A third, "This space let me be loud without apology. I've never been given that before." Elaine read each one slowly, quietly, in the privacy of her studio corner beneath the soft light of a floor lamp. She didn't annotate. She didn't sort them, she just let them exist. Nina stopped by later that day, cheeks flushed from the cold, a paper coffee cup in one hand. "They're overwhelmed," she said simply. "They feel seen." Elaine nodded, fingers resting on the topmost letter. "That's all I ever wanted," she said, then softer. "Just not at the cost of silence." That afternoon, Margot stopped by with her usual noise, boots scuffing across the gallery floor, scarf trailing behind her like a signature. She saw the pile of letters, flipped through them, and paused at one written in teal marker with the edges doodled in cartoon vines. "Can I frame this one?" she asked. Elaine tilted her head. "Why that one?" Margot grinned. "It says, 'Thank you for making space that never asks who I'm trying to be.'" Elaine smiled. "Then yes." The next morning, it hung in the West Wing, right where Cassidy's largest canvas used to live. No plaque, just glass, a white frame, and those words, handwritten and raw, hovering over the gallery like a quiet kind of freedom. Jordan arrived that Saturday. No warning, just the soft knock she always used, like she wasn't sure if she was interrupting grief or helping to reshape it. Elaine opened the door to find her granddaughter bundled in an oversized jacket, cheeks pink, eyes calm. "I wanted to see the exhibit," Jordan said, "in person, not just on Instagram." Elaine let her in without comment. They walked the gallery slowly, not as tour guide and guest, but as equals. They lingered at the installations, laughed once at a sculpture that looked unintentionally like a misshapen hot dog. And when they reached the framed letter on the far wall, Jordan stood in front of it without speaking. She read it twice, then looked at Elaine, didn't ask anything, just nodded. Elaine didn't fill the silence, didn't offer a speech. They kept walking. Later, on the back porch, tea steaming in their mugs and November wind curling beneath the eaves, Jordan tucked her legs beneath her and glanced toward the yard. "So," she said softly, "now what?" Elaine didn't answer right away. Then, gently, "We can still be family." Jordan turned to her. "Even like this?" Elaine nodded. "Especially like this." She set her mug down. "As two people, not three." Jordan didn't speak, but she reached out and took Elaine's hand in hers, thumb brushing against the knuckles. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it landed. That night, Elaine added a new line to her emotional log, received letters. Gratitude from strangers, truth unburdened. Jordan saw it, understood it, stayed. She closed the book, didn't shelve it, didn't hide it, just left it open again, this time not because it needed air, but because it was becoming a habit to let the truth breathe. At Cassidy's apartment, the fridge buzzed faintly in the dark. She scrolled her phone, watched as another tagged post from the exhibit racked up likes. The letter in the frame, circulating online now, had 300 shares. Everyone praising the residency, the gallery, the anonymous donor. She zoomed in on the photo, saw the faint reflection in the frame. Elaine, in the corner of the shot, standing just outside the camera's center, still present, still there, just not for her. Louis called just after lunch. Elaine answered on the second ring, already seated in the sunroom with a legal pad resting on her lap and a pen uncapped beside her. There was no sense of dread, no bracing, just the last checkmark on a list long since decided. "All documents are recorded," Louis said. "Filed and backed up with the county registrar, foundation board, and fiduciary review panel. Digital and hard copy. Irrevocable. Final." Elaine nodded to herself. "Medical directives, too?" "Dated and notarized," he confirmed. "No contest options. Jordan designated as secondary emergency contact. No proxy responsibilities." "And Cassidy?" There was a pause, respectful but not hesitant. "She's not listed anywhere." Elaine exhaled. Not relief, not grief, just the air that needed to leave. "Thank you, Louis." "Always," he said. She didn't tell anyone she was going, not Margot, not Jordan, not Nina. She packed light, 2 sweaters, a pair of wool socks, a half-used sketchbook, and her favorite pen, the one with the cracked cap she refused to replace. The retreat cabin wasn't far, just north of the river trail, tucked behind a grove of pine and birch. The gallery had used it for years to host visiting artists, but no one was booked this weekend. She'd reserved it under her foundation alias, Just in case Cassidy still had eyes on the public calendars, the front door groaned slightly as she stepped in, cold inside, but clean. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. A single cot, a desk, a window, no television, no signal. Just quiet. She built a fire in the wood stove with shaking hands. Not from nerves, but from unfamiliar slowness. The kind that arrives when no one expects you. When nothing must be justified or explained. By nightfall, she was reading Old Roads, New Maps, a collection of essays on revision, perspective, and storytelling as a form of survival. She underlined 2 lines in the introduction and then stopped annotating altogether. Not everything needed to be recorded. In the morning, she sketched, not for display, not for permanence, just to move her hand across the page and see if there was anything left that wanted to speak without interruption. She drew a tree with a cracked trunk, then a river, then nothing for 2 hours. Just breath. By the second evening, she had written a single page in her journal. Not the estate log, not the binder. Just a softcover notebook she hadn't touched in months. She wrote, "The paperwork is finished. The names are gone. The silence is mine. Legacy doesn't beg to stay connected. It only asks not to be undone." She capped the pen, let the sentence stand without a period. Not to leave it open, but because it no longer needed closing. Back at the gallery, a delivery arrived. A small envelope marked confidential was slipped under Nina's office door. No return address. Inside, a photo, framed. Cassidy as a child sitting on the gallery floor, surrounded by crayons and open sketchbooks. Her back was to the camera, but her head was tilted toward the light. No note, no demand. Just the past, returned without ownership. Nina looked at it for a long time, then turned it face down. At the cabin, Elaine watched snow begin to fall. Thin flakes, uncommitted, but still there. She didn't move, she just opened a new page, and began again. The desert was quiet in a way Elaine had forgotten to want. No wind, no obligation. Just the soft crunch of boots on sand and the occasional hush of a bird overhead, gliding, unbothered. She and Jordan walked a narrow trail carved between sun-worn boulders and sage. It was late afternoon, sky pale blue and endless. The kind of horizon that made you feel wide without needing to expand. No tension between them, no subtext. Just time, simple and shared. Jordan carried a water bottle and a folded brochure from a local sculpture garden they'd passed earlier. Elaine carried nothing but a folded sheet of paper, creased and soft at the corners. She hadn't planned to show it, but when they reached a rise in the trail and paused to catch their breath, she handed it over without ceremony. Jordan unfolded it. A list of names, just first names, 18 of them, next to each, a short description. Solo show, Chicago. Residency funded. Accepted to Parsons. Sold first piece. Still painting. Jordan read them slowly. These are all from the gallery. Elaine nodded. The ones the world said wouldn't last. Jordan touched one line. Sasha, didn't quit. None of them asked you to disappear, she said, not as a question. Elaine looked out toward the horizon. The light had started to shift, casting long gold across the rock. Her voice came without hesitation. And I never had to beg to stay. They stood like that for a while, the paper fluttering lightly in Jordan's hands. The weight of legacy settled somewhere beneath their feet, instead of pressing down from above. When they returned to the gallery 2 days later, the building looked different in the morning light. Less like a space to impress, more like a place that breathed. Jordan unlocked the front door while Elaine grabbed the mail from the box out front. Mostly flyers, one donation check, and a handwritten note from a student in Portland. Inside, a new plaque had been installed on the main hall wall, just left of the front desk. Nina had it made while Elaine was away. Simple, matte brass, in honor of creative distance. Elaine didn't speak. She just reached out, brushed the edge of the plaque with 2 fingers, and nodded once. It wasn't a statement. It was a boundary, honored in metal. Cassidy never contacted her again. No letters, no lawyers, no more stage drop-ins. Just silence, sustained and unbroken. Elaine had once feared that silence, feared it meant failure, that to be unheard was to be undone. But now it was different. Now it was space. At home, Elaine opened her journal. The same soft-cover notebook she'd brought to the cabin, still open to that last page. Legacy doesn't beg to stay connected. It only asks not to be undone. She turned to a fresh one, picked up her pen, and wrote, "My daughter said, 'Stay out of my life,' so I erased her from mine, legally," and not a single sentence was missing. She placed the pen down gently, then closed the journal, not to hide it, but because the story was finished.